September 1939, a Nazi officer stands before the gates, his hands shaking as he holds a report. Inside those walls, something Berlin fears more than Soviet tanks, a city entirely dedicated to destroying everything Hitler represents. But how did a 5'3" Franciscan friar create the most dangerous weapon against the Reich? And why did the Nazis see this place as a greater threat than entire armored divisions? The answer is buried deep within the foundations of Niepokalanów, the city of the Immaculate. Have you ever felt like you were living at the wrong time in history? Too late for great battles? Too early for great discoveries? Maximilian Kolbe felt exactly the opposite in 1927. He knew evil was coming, not through mystical visions or prophecies, but through something far more terrifying: pure logic. Kolbe studied the numbers: German unemployment rates, Mein Kampf sales, the frequency of radio broadcasts. To him, each statistic was a fire alarm screaming in the dead of night. While the world slept, Kolbe built. He bought 150 acres of swampy land near Warsaw. His superiors thought he'd gone mad, spending the order's meager resources on useless land. For what purpose? To create the first weapon of mass destruction of the modern era. Not nuclear, not chemical, informational. Niepokalanów would be a media city, a printing press so powerful it could reach half of Europe in 48 hours. Kolbe had discovered something Hitler didn't even know yet. The future belonged to whoever controlled the narratives. But there's a crucial difference between true prophets and false prophets. False prophets promise impossible paradises. True prophets prepare for inevitable hells. And hell was scheduled to arrive in 12 years, 1928. The first brick is laid. Kolbe didn't hire contractors. He called for volunteers, men who worked for free because they believed in something bigger than wages. Can you imagine the noise? Hammers echoing through the pre-dawn hours, trucks sinking into the mire, voices singing prayers amidst sweat and cement. They were building more than buildings. They were building physical hope, because Kolbe understood something fundamental about human nature. Pure ideas are fragile, but ideas crystallized in brick and metal become indestructible. Hitler would build Nuremberg to glorify power. Kolbe built Niepokalanów to glorify love. The difference? One city inspired fear, the other inspired sacrifice. And have you noticed how people willing to die always defeat people willing to kill? 1930, the first machines arrive. Not ordinary printing presses, mechanical monsters capable of producing 500,000 copies a month. The noise was deafening. Day and night, the engines roared like iron dragons, but there was music in that noise, the symphony of resistance being forged. Kolbe walked among the machines like a general inspecting armaments, because that's exactly what he was doing. Each printing press was a cannon, each magazine was a bullet, each distributor was a soldier, but soldiers in a war that hadn't officially begun yet. The Reichsheer's Niepokalanów, the Night of the Immaculate, reached a circulation of 750,000 copies a month, the largest Catholic publication in the world, more widely read than secular newspapers. Kolbe had discovered a secret that eluded traditional politicians. It doesn't matter how many votes you have, it matters how many minds you shape. And minds once shaped are impossible to conquer. The enemies began to notice. Local communists organized boycotts. Liberal politicians questioned licenses. But Kolbe smiled when he read the attacks, because he knew they only attack what they fear, and what they truly feared was simple. Niepokalanów proved that a third way existed between unrestrained capitalism and brutal communism, an economy based on voluntary donation, sacrificial labor, and redistribution through love. It was too dangerous to exist. 1933. Hitler seizes power in Germany. The news reaches Niepokalanów by telegraph. Kolbe reads the paper twice, carefully folds it, puts it in his pocket. He walks to the chapel in absolute silence. There, before the altar, he offers the strangest prayer in modern history. He doesn't ask for protection. He doesn't ask for peace. He asks for the courage to finish the work on time, because he knew Hitler wasn't a historical accident. He was the logical consequence of decades of untreated despair, soulless materialism, and purposeless nationalism. Niepokalanów would be the antidote. But antidotes only work if administered before the poison takes effect. The city grows. 800 permanent inhabitants, a radio station, carpentry workshops, self-sustaining farms, a flying school run by friars. Yes, you heard that right. Friars learning to fly airplanes, because Kolbe understood something revolutionary about modern evangelization. The gospel needs to travel at the speed of the times, and the speed of the times was the speed of the engines. But there's a detail no one mentions in the official biographies. Niepokalanów wasn't just a religious city, it was a laboratory of resistance, a training ground for spiritual warfare. The inhabitants learned three fundamental things: how to live without depending on the system, how to communicate truths under censorship, how to die without giving up information. Useless skills in times of peace, essential in times of war. And the war was coming with the precision of a Swiss watch. 1936, Germany remilitarizes the Rhineland. Niepokalanów increases production. No coincidence. Kolbe establishes a military routine disguised as a monastic routine. Wake up at 3:30 a.m., prayer at 4 a.m., work until 7 p.m., sleep at 9 p.m., 7 days a week. No exceptions. Why? Because discipline is what separates martyrs from victims. Victims suffer randomly. Martyrs suffer strategically. And Kolbe was training martyrs. Niepokalanov's publications began circulating clandestinely in Germany, translated into German by volunteers, printed on thin paper, distributed through secret networks. Each copy was a seed planted in hostile territory. Hitler banned imports, multiplied domestic production, banned possession, multiplied the desire to read, because banning something is the best way to make it irresistible. Kolbe knew this, and he used Nazi paranoia as fuel for expansion. 1937, the Vatican expresses concern. Niepokalanów is growing too fast, too much influence, too much power for a simple friar. Kolbe receives the papal letter in silence, reads it 3 times, writes a one-line response. Mary built this city. I only obey. It's the perfect answer to an impossible question. How do you explain that you're not building a personal empire, but preparing a spiritual bunker? How do you explain that every brick is a barricade against the evil that's coming? The answer satisfies Rome temporarily, but it doesn't satisfy Berlin. Gestapo reports begin to mention Niepokalanów, an anomalous city, questionable loyalty, dangerous influence. Investigators arrive disguised as tourists. They photograph buildings, count residents, map distribution routes. What they discover terrorizes them. Niepokalanów isn't a common town with a church. It's a church built in the shape of a town. Every inhabitant is a minister. Every building is a center of evangelization. Every activity is a form of active prayer. It's Christian totalitarianism, but a totalitarianism based on voluntary love, not on imposed fear. And that is infinitely more dangerous than any political opposition. Because politics you can buy, politicians you can blackmail, parliaments you can dissolve. But how do you destroy an entire city willing to die for what it loves? The question haunts Nazi strategists, and it should haunt them, because in 18 months they would discover the answer in the most brutal way possible. 1938, the annexation of Austria. Kolbe accelerates all projects. The radio station broadcasts 18 hours a day. The printing presses operate in 3 shifts. The pilots make increasingly longer flights. Niepokalanów prepares to resist. But resist how? With what weapons? With what strategy? The answer had been written for centuries, on every page of the gospel that speaks of overcoming evil with good, in every verse that promises that the gates of hell will not prevail. Kolbe read it all literally and prepared his city to prove that some truths are indestructible, even when confronted with the most efficient war machine in human history. September the 1st, 1939, 4:45 a.m. The Schleswig-Holstein opens fire on Westerplatte. World War II has officially begun, but in Niepokalanów the war had begun 12 years earlier. At 5:30 a.m., the bells ring as they always have, not in panic. In a call to prayer, Kolbe walks the corridors as he always has, not running, not hiding, prepared. The first refugees arrive before noon, entire families carrying only what they can carry, crying children, exhausted pregnant women. Men with the eyes of those who have seen too much. Niepokalanów opens all its gates. In 48 hours the population doubles, then triples. There aren't enough beds. There isn't enough food. There isn't enough space. But there's something that no army can destroy. There's organization born of love. The friars share their own beds. The kitchens operate 24 hours a day. Orphaned children are instantly adopted by families who have just lost everything. It's the capitalism of Christ in action. Material scarcity generating spiritual abundance. Hitler promised a 1,000-year Reich based on force. Kolbe created a 12-year city based on generosity. Which of the two would you choose as a model of civilization? September 17th. The Wehrmacht crosses the western border. The Red Army invades from the east. Poland disappears from the map in 18 days. Niepokalanów continues to function. The printing presses roar louder than bombers. The radio station broadcasts news that the Nazis censor. The pilots make increasingly dangerous flights, taking information to the resistance, because Kolbe understood something fundamental about tyranny. Tyrants don't fear weapons and they fear truths, and Niepokalanów had become the largest factory of truths in Eastern Europe. The first German soldiers arrive in October, not as invaders, as curious visitors. Because Berlin wants to understand the phenomenon before destroying it. What they find completely disorients them. A city without police that has no crime. An economy without banks that has no poverty. A society without government that has no conflict. It's everything that National Socialism promises to be, but never manages to achieve. And that is a problem. A huge problem. Because how do you explain to your people that Jews and Catholics built in 12 years what you promised to build in 1,000? The solution is obvious. Destroy the evidence. November 1939, closure order. Niepokalanów must cease all activities. Printing presses confiscated. Radio silenced. Residents dispersed. Kolbe reads the order 3 times, folds the paper carefully, puts it in his pocket. He walks to the chapel for the last time as a free man. But he does something that no religious leader has done in modern history. He doesn't pray for divine protection. He prays in gratitude for the opportunity to prove that some things are stronger than bayonets. Because martyrdom isn't about dying. It's about demonstrating that there are indestructible values, and Kolbe was about to give the greatest demonstration of the modern era. February 1941, second arrest. This time there's no planned release, no possible negotiation. Kolbe knows where he's going even before he boards the train. Auschwitz-Birkenau. The name doesn't yet haunt nightmares. It doesn't yet symbolize the absolute abyss of human evil. It's just a concentration camp among hundreds of others. But for Kolbe, it's the final stage, the place where his entire life will make sense. May 28, 1941. Prisoner number 16670, Block 14, slave labor in the fields. 12 hours a day under the scorching sun or freezing rain. Kolbe works as everyone works, eats as everyone eats, sleeps as everyone sleeps. But he does something that no prisoner does. He evangelizes. In secret, during rest hours, in the dark corners of the barracks, he whispers words of hope to men who have forgotten that hope exists. He shares his bread ration with those who are starving. He offers his place in line to those who are weaker. He cleans infected wounds with his own hands. The guards notice. This prisoner is different. Dangerous in a way they can't explain. Because how do you break someone who has already chosen to be broken voluntarily? How do you terrorize someone who has transformed terror into a tool of sanctification? July 1941. A prisoner escapes from Block 14. Standard procedure. 10 men from the same block will be starved to death as an example. The names are drawn randomly. Franciszek Gajowniczek is chosen, a family man. He cries remembering his wife and children, whom he will never see again. It is at this moment that the impossible happens. Kolbe steps forward, breaks the formation, looks directly into the eyes of Commandant Karl Fritsch. I would like to die in this prisoner's place. Absolute silence. 1,000 prisoners hold their breath. Guards, confused, frantically search their manuals for precedent. There is none. No one volunteers to die in Auschwitz. No one trades a chance at survival for another's certain death. No one except someone who spent a lifetime preparing for this very moment. Why? Fritsch asks. He has a family. I am just an old priest. The answer is technically true, but it hides the complete truth. The complete truth is that Kolbe finally found the perfect platform, the place where a single act would speak louder than 12 years of sermons. The place where he could prove that love is stronger than hate, not theoretically, practically. The place where he would transform the greatest defeat into the greatest victory. Fritsch accepts the exchange, not out of compassion, but morbid curiosity. He wants to see how long this brave priest takes to break when real hunger sets in. The starvation bunker. Cellar 11. Cell 18. 10 men locked inside with no food, no water, only darkness and the wait for death. The normal procedure takes 2 weeks. First, desperate screams, then pathetic pleas. Finally, the silence of madness. But from cell 18 come different sounds, prayers, hymns, words of encouragement. Kolbe transformed the starvation bunker into Auschwitz's first chapel. The guards are disturbed. How can someone sing when starving to death? How can someone console others when suffering equally? How can someone demonstrate joy in a place designed to produce absolute despair? The answer is simple, and at the same time, incomprehensible. Kolbe discovered what tyrants can never understand. You can only torture bodies. You cannot torture souls that have chosen freedom, and free souls are contaminants. They inspire other souls to break free. After 2 weeks, 9 men are dead. Kolbe is still alive, still praying, still smiling at the guards. It's impossible, medically impossible, psychologically impossible, but it's happening. And that is more terrifying than any sabotage, because it proves that there are forces in the universe that bullets cannot stop. August 14th, 1941. The Nazis give up waiting for Kolbe to die naturally. A lethal injection of carbolic acid. Kolbe extends his arm willingly, looks into the eyes of the doctor administering the injection, whispers a prayer in Latin. He dies with a smile on his lips. It's the first time in the history of Auschwitz that someone dies smiling, and that breaks something fundamental in the psychology of the place, because if someone can smile here, then this place is not invincible. If someone can choose joy in hell, then hell does not have absolute power. If someone can win by dying, then the victors are not really winning. Franciszek Gajowniczek survives the war, returns home, reunites with his wife, raises his children, lives until 1995, dies at 93 surrounded by family. Every time someone asks him about Auschwitz, he tells the same story. The priest who died in his place, the man who transformed the worst place on earth into the best example of humanity. The story spreads, first through Poland, then through Europe, finally across the world. Kolbe is canonized in 1982, but the official canonization only confirms what millions already knew. Niepokalanów defeated Berlin. Love conquered hate. The city Kolbe built to defeat Hitler really defeated Hitler, not through bombs, through example, not by destroying the enemy, by transforming enemies into admirers, not by proving that Catholics are superior to Nazis, by proving that humanity is superior to inhumanity. Today, Niepokalanów still exists, still produces publications, still receives pilgrims, still demonstrates that it's possible to build communities based on generosity. Hitler promised a 1,000-year Reich. It lasted 12. Kolbe built a 12-year city. It has lasted 85, and it will last forever, because some victories are eternal, some cities are indestructible, some people change the world by dying the right way. Maximilian Kolbe understood this in 1927 and spent the rest of his life proving he was right. The question that remains is simple and personal. What are you building that can survive any storm? What kind of city are you creating in your own life? Because in the end, we are all judged not by what we destroy, but by what we build, not by what we fear, but by what we love more than life itself. Kolbe knew this, and that's why, 83 years later, we're still talking about him, still learning from him, still being inspired by him. Niepokalanów won.